Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and I'm so happy you're here. If this is your first time stopping by, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and now, without further ado, let's get started. For our first project, we're going to be using a wooden board, a wooden cross, and a wooden crate, and then some burlap ribbon. And so the first thing I like to do with every project is to start with the painting. So I'm going to get everything unpackaged, unwrapped, get the stickers off of my pieces. And with this wooden board, they have some chalk that's stuck to the back of the board, and that's the front that we're going to be using for our project. And then I'm going to take some spackle, also from the Dollar Tree, and cover up the hole in my wooden cross. And then I'm just going to sand out anything that doesn't look like it should be there or is rough, along with that spackle that's at the top of my cross. So now I'm going to take a brown paper bag and I'm just going to wrap my wooden crate in that and kind of scrunchie it up so that it gets nice and wrinkled. And then I'm going to take some masking tape and just kind of adhere it around that crate and get it all nice and secure, keeping my bottom flat but making sure that those creases and wrinkles stay in place. I know it looks like a hot mess now, but I promise it'll make sense in a minute. So now I'm going to take my Waverly Wax in Antique and I'm going to stain my cross, and I'm just starting with the edges first because that way I can hold it without it getting too messy and on my hands, and then I'll be able to lay that down and then do the top, and then after that dries I'm going to do the back side as well. So then once I get my wax onto the cross, I'm going to use either a wipey or a paper towel to wipe off the excess. And we're going to be staining quite a few crosses in this video, so just remember how I did it here, and then that way you can remember for our last project. So now I'm just going to use my Waverly chalk paint in white and paint my board, and I'm going to let a little bit of it peek out because I'm going to sand it at the end anyway, so it's going to be nice and rustic. So now I'm going to use my chalk paint in Truffle, and I'm going to paint my entire block, and I'll let some of that brown paper bag show through as well. And then once the Truffle is almost dry, I'm going to go back in with my silver lining and mineral chalk paint and just kind of splotch it on there with my paintbrush and let it blend in, but make it look like it's stone. Hopefully you think it looks like stone too. But I won't have to paint the bottom or the back side of my box because it's going to be adhered to my sign. So now I'm going to take my burlap ribbon and I'm just going to cut off a little piece and then shape it into a little banner. So I'm giving it a dovetail at the bottom, but I want it to be able to fold over so that I can attach it on some jute twine. So I just made 3 of those little flags for my banner, and then I'm going to fold it around my jute twine and then just add a little bit of hot glue and push that down using my Dollar Tree face mask silicone mask applicator. I always forget what these are called. And then once they're all nice and attached, I'm going to take my black paint pen that I get from Walmart and I'm going to write Y, W-H-Y. And that'll be the first word in our scripture. And I'm going to attach that to the left-hand corner of our board. That'll all make sense in a minute. So now that my tomb rock is completely dry, I'm going to take some scrap sheet that I had left over from a rag wreath that I made in a fall DIY, and I'm going to make the shroud, which is what Jesus's body was wrapped in when he was buried, and then the sudarium, which is what was used to cover his face. And I'm just going to let that shroud kind of hang over and drape all pretty down the side of the rock, and then I'm going to glue it in place, and then I'll put the sudarium next to it, and then I'll glue the entire piece to the bottom left of the board and then just make sure that it stands up nice and straight when I attach it. So now to make my cross all nice and rustic, I'm going to use my sanding block and sand all of the edges to get it nice and worn. And then I'm going to get my words ready to attach to my board using my Silhouette Cameo 3. So what I'm going to do is I'll use the black vinyl to show up on the white board, and then I'll use the white vinyl to show up on my darker cross. And so I'm going to be using the scripture Luke 24:5, where the women that go to the tomb after Jesus's burial and they find it empty, and there are two angels that appear to them and ask the question, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" And so this is a really important scripture because not only does it apply to what's going on at the moment, and so they're explaining that Jesus is alive, and so why would they be coming to look for him in a tomb, which is where people that are dead would be. So that's one of the meanings. But then also for our own lives, why do we seek the living among the dead? And so that's a way of kind of explaining that the world is not where we're going to get our joy, where we're going to get our fulfillment, but only through Jesus. And he says numerous times that he's the way, the truth, and the life, or he is the resurrection and the life. In John 10:10, he says that I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So this is all kind of a lesson. I need to start another channel so that I can just go on and tell you more about some of these scriptures that are so exciting and so meaningful. And I just can't weed or paint enough to get this all out. But anyway, you get the idea. Our life does not come from this world. It comes only from Jesus. So you can see here that I don't have the word why in this question because that's going to be on our banner. So it's going to say why in the corner, and then do you seek the, and then living will be on the cross, and then among the dead will be under that, and then Luke 24:5 will be at the very bottom. I did have a hole there because I didn't plan for that to be there. I originally thought I would put it over the stone, but I decided it looked better, and so I'm going to change that up, and I'll fill that hole first and then repaint it, and then I'll put the Luke 24:5 down at the bottom. And so one of the good things about making your own decals is that you can cut them apart and place them wherever you want and where they look best. So even if you purchase a decal like this one, you can separate it by just cutting it apart and then attaching it in separate pieces. So now I'm going to take my cross and I'm putting my finger on the part where it's going to have glue so I know not to go past that area, and then I'll put glue on that and then attach it to the side of my board and then attach the rest of my decals. Now, if you don't have a cutting machine, you can do this by hand, and I have a video linked in the description box below called No Cricut, No Problem, and that'll show you how to use the transfer method and you can get your words onto your project. So now I'm going to take the excess twine from my banner and just glue it to the back of my sign, and of course you want to paint the back if you're giving this away or doing it for yourself. I'm just conserving on my chalk paint. And then I'm going to take a sanding sponge and rough up the edges and get it rustic looking. And then I took a sweet little flower from the Dollar Tree and just attached it to the top for a little pop of color. And here it is, all finished, and I love how this turned out. It's so sweet and such a great message for Easter. It is the whole meaning of Easter. It may not be exactly correct in what it was that Jesus actually laid on, but I know what it means for me. I know that it has Jesus at the center of it, but I love it, and I hope you like it too. Today I'm so excited to be participating in a spring and Easter collaboration with a few of my sisters in Christ and showcasing the true meaning of Easter. We have KRAFTY, LEENY, the crafting cousins Kay and Trish, and Nadia at DIY with Nadia. So if you want to see more Jesus-centered projects, I'll have all of their videos linked in the description box below. For our next Dollar Tree DIY, I'm going to be using these adorable felt flower coasters, some poster letter stickers, some jute twine, and then some tin can lids that I've been collecting. And so the first thing I did was took my stickers and I'm just going to spell out "He is risen," and I'm going to put one on each of my tin can lids. Now, I had mentioned to start saving your lids so that we could do a project, and I had originally planned to do a winter project but didn't get to do it. So we're going to do this one and then probably another project later for something else. So what I did was I put my sticker down and then I'm going to take my paint and I'm going to go right over those letters. And originally I wanted to have this kind of messy and look like brush strokes, but I ended up not liking it. So I'm going to go back a little bit later and kind of redo it and color it in a little bit more. And then on one of my lids, I'm going to leave it blank and just paint it. And then I'm going to put a cross on top of it for the beginning of our little garland. So once I started taking off the letters and leaving the exposed tin can, I really liked the look of the sticker. So I decided to kind of make this a twofer. And I'm going to use those stickers to place onto a sign. So I was able to get 2 DIYs out of this project. So I have a handheld can opener and it leaves a really smooth edge when you take the lids off. And so I'll have that can opener linked in the description box below, but it's also listed in my Amazon store and I get a lot of questions about it. So now I'm going to get my sign ready before I take the rest of my letters off because I decided that they were so pretty. I was going to get this second DIY in there. So I just took some lavender chalk paint and I'm going to add a little bit of white to it and then paint the back of this Easter sign. And I let it be a little bit streaky and have the different colors all blended and pretty, and oh, it's so pretty. Anyway, I decided to use the purple because that is the color for royalty and that signifies how our Lord is the King. So I'm going to take my letters and I'm going to put "He" and "is" at the top, and then "risen" is going to go vertically all the way down the rest of the sign. And so they had lost some of their adhesive from being on the tin can, but then I'm going to go back in with my Mod Podge to just give it some tackiness on the back. And then I'm going to take my Waverly varnish and go over the entire piece, and it's a matte finish, so it doesn't even look like there's anything on there, but that's going to attach all of my letters nice and securely. So now I'm going back to my garland while the varnish is drying, and I'm going to take my coasters and just cut the little bow off of them, and there's 4 pieces for each of those coasters. So I'm going to use 6 of each color, and since 4 comes in one, it's 1.5 packages. So 4 from one and 2 from the other. And then I'm going to get them in the order that I want, and I'm going to draw that out ahead of time so that I don't get confused and get the wrong color for my letters, and make sure that they're in the right order. So I'll have 3 flowers at the beginning, and then my cross on my lid, and then another flower in between, and then HE, and then a flower, and then is, and then a flower, and then risen, and then followed by 3 more flowers. And I want to make sure that they stay all in the same order as far as color. So now I'm going to take my jute twine, and I keep it in this canister that I made. It's a Dollar Tree DIY that is in another video that I'll link in the description box below, but it keeps everything nice and straight and doesn't get tangly. So I'm going to take a needle that has a really big eye and feed my twine into it, and then I'll start feeding my pieces onto the twine. And I'm just using the top 2 sections of each of those flowers to thread my twine onto. I ended up having a crooked E, but you'll see that at the end. And here's where I'm filling in a little bit more of my lid with some white chalk paint. And then I'm going to go back in with a black paint pen and I'll make a circle all the way around just to give it a little bit more detail and interest and kind of more defined. And then using some black and white gingham ribbon from the Dollar Tree, I'm going to make sweet little bows to glue at the top of each of those letters. And then for my blank lid, I'm just going to take a couple of pieces of twigs from my bush outside, and I'm just going to make a cross using some hot glue, and then I'll take a little teeny piece of jute twine to wrap around the middle, and then I'll glue it onto my lid. And here it is all finished, and I really love these spring colors, and I love the flowers and how delicate they are, and then the juxtaposition with those tin can lids. It seems like there were a lot of steps to this, but oh, we have a second one that's coming up. That's why it seems like it took so long. But anyway, I love how this one turned out, and I hope you like it too. I am so sorry about that crooked E. I don't know how I missed that. Anyway, so now back to our sign. I'm going to take a black paint pen again, and I'm just going to make kind of a curved line at the very top, and then I'm going to go back and do some squiggly lines, and then just keep filling it in and making it more and more, a little bit fuller, and then I'm going to start making some lines pointing out and going in different directions to make it look like a crown of thorns. And then I'll just make some of those lines a little bit thicker to give it some dimension. And then I'm going to take my red paint pen and make a small little teeny tiny heart that's kind of dripping so that it looks like a drop of blood, but it's also Jesus's love for us. So now I'm going to take my sanding sponge, and as always we're going to distress those edges just by sanding them down, and then I'm going to take 3 stems of this super pretty Dollar Tree lavender, and I'm going to glue those to the side of my sign. I had originally planned to let the stems kind of show underneath my bow, but I'm going to change that a little bit, and you'll see that in just a second. So after I get my lavender down, I'm going to make a perky bow using the fold over method with this black and white gingham Dollar Tree ribbon. And I'm just going to fold it over. I think it was 4 or 5 times. I'm not sure. It was the end of the spool, so I just used it all. And then I'm going to make teeny tiny little slits right in the middle, and then I'll use a chenille stem to put those together and twist it in the back. And then I'm going to foof those loops out by just kind of twisting them and pulling them apart, one going to the right, one going to the left. But this is definitely the easiest way to make a bow out of this 5/8 inch ribbon. So once I get it done, I'm going to attach it to the lower part of my stems, and then I'm going to cover that bottom part up because I was a little bit crazy with the glue. And so I'm going to use some burlap ribbon, and I'll just cut a little piece and fold it over so that it fits right under my stems and covers them up. And then I'll just glue it on 3 sides, leaving the top part open, and so it becomes a little pocket for our lavender. And here it is all finished, and I love how this turned out. I'm really surprised because it was an afterthought, and I didn't think that those letters would keep that streaky look that they had once I painted them, but they were perfect and the varnish worked really well. But I love, love, love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. So I had told you guys a while back, many months ago, about a wedding that my daughter Christine and I were decorating for one of our former youth group students from, I don't know, like 10, 15, I don't know, a lot of years ago. But we had made a stand that I turned into a fall floral arrangement, and I wanted to show you guys how they actually turned out and all of the things that we made. So I made this sign and used Dollar Tree greenery and some Walmart greenery to adorn the sides of it. And then for the centerpieces on the tables, in order to be able to speak through them, I wanted to make sure that they were tall enough and pretty so that you could see right through to the other person. So this is how they turned out. And here's Morgan and Nathaniel, and they had planned for a really big wedding, but then COVID hit, and so they had to downsize and do it at Morgan's parents' house. And you may recognize the suitcases from a Trash to Treasure video. And it even rained, and that's why we have an umbrella over the cake, but they really wanted to get married. So, well, because you know. Anyway, I have a sweet viewer, Rose, who's getting married soon, so she wanted some ideas. So there you go, Rose. And their doggies were so sweet. Anyway, for our next Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using 4 of the 4x4 picture frames and then some chain. And I'm just going to pull everything out of these frames and paint them completely white using my Waverly White chalk paint. And even though these were pre-wrapped, they had some sort of residue on them, so I just used a baby wipe to get those all cleaned off, and then I painted on them. And so I'm just going to do light coats, and I get a lot of questions about people that have problems with chipping or cracking in their chalk paint. So if you just do lighter, thinner coats, let those dry completely before putting on the next coat, that should keep away any of those chips or cracks. So now I'm going to get my chain ready, and these come with 3 strands attached to one big hook. So I took those apart from the big hook by opening it up and then pulling them off, and then I'm going to fold them right in half, and then I'm going to detach them by opening a link and then taking them apart. And then I'm going to take that open link and I'm going to count down 5 links and attach it to that 5th link and then close it back up. So that gives us a little loop at the very top of our chain. And then at the other side, it should have just the flat rounded part, and that's what we'll be attaching to our frame. So I ended up using 1 pack plus an extra strand that I had on hand. So if you don't have any extra chain, you'll have to get 2 packages to do this project. And you can see here that when I split them in half, there was 1 extra link on one side of that chain, so you'll have to remove that too. So now I'm going to take the backboard of my frame and I'm going to use some black cardstock to trace on that square so that I can cut those out, and that's what I'm going to fill my frames with. And then I'm going to use my white paint pen, and on one of them I'm going to put Christ has died. On the next one I'm going to put Christ is risen. And then on the third one I'm going to put Christ will come again. And then on the 4th one, I'm going to put a painted white cross, just using my Waverly White chalk paint and a paintbrush. And this is the memorial acclamation that we say at Mass, and pretty much just sums up the entire Bible. So now I'm going to use my black paint pen to give some distressing to my frames, and I always see Mary at White Cottage Company use this method, and I'm not very good at it, but it's so much more convenient than pulling out my chalk paint and a paintbrush and water. But she does it so easily and so perfectly. I'm still getting used to it, so I think it's something that definitely takes a little bit of practice. So I'm going to do all of the outsides and all of the lines on the insides and just make it look all scuffed up and rustic looking. So now I'm going to put all of the pieces back into my frame, and I'm putting the glass behind the paper for a couple of reasons. I do like the matte look, but also when I'm filming it, you can see me, and you don't want to see me, you want to see the pretties. So now I'm going to take my chain and just using some hot glue, I'm going to place that bottom link into the glue, and then I'm going to take a little piece of linen ribbon and just place it on top of it, and then just push that into that hot glue so that it gets a nice good adhesion. So my original design, I had planned to use a mop handle to hang these all on, but then I decided to go outside and see if I could find a branch just to make it a little more organic and pretty and interesting. And so I found this, took my wire cutters and got all of the little pieces off and made it as flat as possible. And then I just slipped my signs onto the branch and it was done. And here it is all finished, and oh my goodness, I love this so much. I love that tree branch. It still would have been super pretty on the mop handle because the mop handle is white. So if you don't want to use this for Easter, of course, I think it would be so super cute if you have your kids' pictures in there or family pictures. So it doesn't have to be just for Easter. But oh my goodness, I love how this turned out, and it was the easiest DIY of all of them. So I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using a plastic planter, 3 wooden crosses, a hope sign, and then from Walmart, some eucalyptus greenery. And so the first thing I did, just like everything, I'm going to get everything ready to be painted by taking off all of the tags and the strings, filling in those holes with some spackle. And then I'm going to take some sandpaper and I'm going to get my planter ready to paint. I could have spray painted this, but I really wanted that bright white from the Waverly chalk paint. So I'm going to take some sandpaper, and to make sure that there's a good adhesion of that paint, I'm going to sand that all up, and I'm going to paint partway inside of the planter as well. And then for my little hope sign, I'm going to take off the gold part of the hope. And I'm using my CRICUT spatula, and it came off all in one piece, so I might be able to do a twofer with this at a later date. And it has this super pretty off-white color underneath that, so I'm going to sand that down and keep it that way. But I am going to use a paint pen to fill in that little bit of filigree or those little vines that are on the side, but I'll do that in just a second. So now I'm going to paint my planter, and I'm using my paintbrush that my friend gave to me, but I get so many questions on this. This is an Annie Sloan chalk paintbrush, and you can get them only from a stockist that's nearest you. So there can only be one Annie Sloan distributor in a certain area within a certain proximity. So you have to go to the Annie Sloan website to see where your closest one is. And I think there are a couple of places that do sell them online, but nothing like Amazon or not even the Annie Sloan website at this point. And then, as you've seen me do 70-11 times, I'm going to stain my crosses and then sand them down so that they get all nice and rusticy and pretty. So then I'm going to get a little more practice in using my paint pen as the distressor for my planter, and then I'm going to fill in those vines on that hope sign. So now I'm going to take some E6000 and some hot glue, and I really love these smaller tubes because they're a lot easier to handle, and I get those at Walmart. And I'm going to put that on the back of my hope sign, and I don't want to mix up the hot glue with the E6000. And the E6000 is for the long-term hold, and it takes about 24 hours to completely dry. So the hot glue just kind of keeps it in place while it's drying. So now I'm going to take some styrofoam and some floral foam, and I get both of these from the Dollar Tree, and then I'm just going to put those down into the bottom of my planter, and that's what I'll use to place my crosses and my greenery. So for the middle cross, I wanted that to be a little bit higher, so I'm going to take a craft stick and glue that to the back, and then I'll poke him in right into the front and let that be a little bit taller than the other two. So now to fill my planter, I'm going to use this Mainstays eucalyptus from Walmart, and it's $2 per pick, and it's nice and full, so you get a lot for your money. and I'm going to place one on each side, just leaving it all together. I'll cut off some of that stem so it's not quite so long, and then I'll place them going on both sides, and then I'll place one towards the back, and then I'll cut the last one apart and place those stems individually so that you can't see any of the foam. So then for my crown of thorns, I found this pretty grapevine napkin ring from Dollar Tree, but it's only 15 years old, so maybe they still have some, I don't know. But here's how they all turned out, and I love everything here, and I have a DIY from last Easter that I'll have linked in the description box below. But this is so pretty and farmhouse looking. Of course, this is perfect for the Easter season, but I think you could leave this out all year long. But I love how it turned out, and I hope you like it too. I hope you enjoyed all of these Easter projects, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. Don't forget to stop by the other channels that have some Easter and spring DIYs. Let them know that I sent you. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!